Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this. This tutorial is going to be fairly brief. It's meant to give you an introduction of how to navigate through the Macintosh operating system. And the purpose of this is twofold. Number one, I want to make sure that you have a fundamental understanding of how Macintosh's file system is set up, because the video editing software that we use, such as Final Cut Pro, Adobe Premiere, After Effects, all depends on navigating into that file system to find different media and different resources. And secondly, on the other end of the project spectrum, you need to understand the different resources your computer has in terms of storing and sharing your work, and how to make sure those resources are optimized before you get underway on a big project. So follow along. This is going to go kind of quickly. It's not going to cover everything, but it is going to give you the tools that you need to begin searching through the computer and navigating through it. The first thing I want to show you that I like to check fairly often, if you have an icon on your desktop that reads Macintosh HD, you can left click on it, and then either by control clicking or right clicking, you can access an option called Get Info. Get Info is going to be an option you can use to explore the properties of all types of different things, from storage to files to you name it. You can get info on it in the Macintosh operating system. And draw your attention over here to the left. You can see what I'm looking for most particularly is not only the capacity of the drive, which is 499.9 gigabytes, so half a terabyte, but I wanted to see how much space I had available on my hard drive. Before I take on a big video project, I want to have enough space to store any media that I might download from a camera or from another source. So I have 154.47 gigabytes available on this hard drive. Let's keep that number in mind because I'm going to do a little cleanup and ask you to do the same. Now what I can do, now that I know that I have the Get Info tool at my disposal, I'm going to come down to the bottom left of my dock and I'm going to click on the Finder icon. And what that does is that opens up a Finder window. Now, I want to draw your attention to not all these different files that are stored up here, but I want you to look underneath Favorites. You should see an icon with a house next to it. That is your portion of the computer, for lack of a better term. Every user that logs into the computer has a storage area that contains that user's applications, that user's desktop, that user's documents, that user's downloads, that user's music, pictures, movies, and a public folder for all users to access. What's interesting about this is that you need to understand, in our environment, in a computer lab, there are potentially several different user folders taking up space on the overall hard drive. So you are sharing this storage with somebody else. Now I want to look at a couple of different things. I'm going to left click on my movies folder, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut this time, Command and the letter I, to get info. And notice that my movies folder is 99.22 gigabytes. And notice I had 154 gigabytes left on my Macintosh HD. So, out of the 154 gigabytes left, I could potentially clear up another 99 if I deleted everything inside the movies folder. And we'll come back and look at the movies folder here in a minute because I want to compare it to another folder. Say pictures. I left click and then I control click, get info. The pictures folder only takes up about 2 gigabytes. So you can see that movies tend to consume more space than pictures. Music, on the other hand, 264.8 megabytes, not even close to what I've got consumed in the movies folder. So if I want to clean up, I want to start somewhere big. I'm going to double click the movies folder. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Okay, I'm going to actually change the way I view this. I'm going to control click in the white space. I'm going to view as a list. This is handy. And look what this does. It not only allows me to see the name of the different items in the movies folder, but it also allows me to see the amount of space they consume, the size of each individual item. And I can even sort them. If I click on the size button, I can sort these files from largest, 27 gigabytes, all the way down to the smallest. This untitled Final Cut folder down here only takes up 156K. That's a very small amount of space in the grand scheme of things. This ESD 95 QuickTime movie, which is one of the finished products I edited recently, 2.37 gigs. And then these Final Cut libraries are huge. Now let's take a moment, since we are Final Cut students, to take a look at why these are so big. These FCP Vundle files are the equivalent of, similar to zip files on the Windows environment or archive files. These contain a whole bunch of information that is all bundled, appropriately enough, into one collection. If I left click on day and then I control click on it, there's an option that's kind of strange. It doesn't show up with everything. It says show package contents. So I left click. And then I see, okay, there's several folders. Let's see, if I left click on this one called day 1, and then I use the command I, 7.8 gigabytes in that day 1 folder. Okay. ESD, command I, 19.25 gigabytes. So there is a lot of media or something in these folders. I'm going to expand the ESD folder, original media, render files, shared items, transcoded media. Okay, let's see how big these are. Okay, 370 megabytes for original, 18 gigabytes for render files. Shared items, 972 bytes. That is not big at all. Transcoded media, 160K, not a lot of that. So what I want you to take away from this is, since we are working in Final Cut Pro, every one of these bundle files represents a library in the Final Cut environment. So if I open up Final Cut Pro, you'll see I have a library called Day. And these are pictures from my class reunion. So if I resize this window and get to where I can see both Final Cut and the actual file storage in the movies folder, here is Day, the FCP bundle, and here is Day, the Final Cut library. So now you can see how these tie in. You can see that each one of these bundle files represents a library that you've created in Final Cut Pro. And you can get information about the size of each library by selecting it through the movies folder where it's usually saved, Command I or Control click and get info, and you can see how large it is. Now, I'm going to quit Final Cut Pro. This really encompasses everything I wanted you to see, with one exception. The trash folder. If you open that and select, you can select all those files, Command I, get info, and see how big your trash folder is, 6 gigabytes. I'll walk you through more of this during class, but for right now, this gives you the options to explore what is taking up space on your computer.